everyone. Welcome into class. Let me go through the list and see who's here. Let's see. Crusader, thank you for being first. Matsu, hello. Anivet, welcome. Rokas, blah blah Zen, hello. Hi, everyone. We are here today for the first author interview. It's happening with Gillian St. Kevern, one of my favorite authors. I'm so excited. um, how are you? How is everyone today? And how are you today, Gillian?
I am really excited. So we've kind of known each other peripherally on Facebook for years now, but this is the first time we've chatted. And even before the stream started, we've just had so
Yeah.
much to talk about. I'm like, yes, this is so much fun. I cannot wait for more because
Yes.
now we get to talk about books.
Yes, oh, I love talking about books. Ike, welcome in. So everyone it might be new today, hello, welcome. My name is Sophia Ignosi, and we are going to be talking about books and quite a few that Jillian has written. Let me see. Let me pull up. I didn't think to put this up ahead of time, but here is a Here's a picture of um, like the book that got me hooked. Oh, I like that. The book that got me hooked. Where is it? I saved it. Um, right here. Ta-da-ta-da. Secretary and the Ghost sitting on my desk right now. Um, I loved that book. So, would you like to introduce yourself to my viewers?
Oh gosh, yes. So hi, I'm Gillian St. Kevern, author of Empowering Queer Fantasy That Confounds Expectations. I write pretty much whatever I want, which is fantastic. But it means that my books kind of cross genre. So I've got paranormal suspense with elements of horror and erotica. I have a Christmas seasonal comedy erotica, and that is not a combination that works. And I have a series, the Deep Magic series set in
Mm.
Wales, which I describe as urban fantasy without the urban. And then I have the Read by Candlelight series, of which the Secretary and the Ghost is part of. And this series is so much fun because every book kind of has a different tone and a different genre. The Secretary and the Ghost is pretty much a tropey historical romance with a ghost. But other books in the series, we've got a murder mystery. We have kind of two coming of ages. We have ace narrators. We've got two lesbian narrators. We've actually got the LGBTQ plus spectrum almost entirely covered, which is exciting. Queer representation is very important to me. The only thing that all my books have in common is the queer representation, the world building, and my sense of humor. So you never quite know what you're going to get with me. And I think that's part of the fun because honestly, I never know either.
That's the way it is with characters. Raya, welcome to class. Annivet says, wow, at this point, in which genres haven't you written about?
Well, that's the thing. So I've got a couple of books that I've written. I thought I was writing YA. It turns out I was writing middle grade. I do have a YA book published. The middle grade one is kind of languishing with an editor. I sent it to the editor to take a look at, and I haven't heard back from 3 years. So I'm guessing
Oh,
the news is not good. I've written but not published a vintage mystery. So
oh,
it turns out that if the mystery has werewolves in it, I'm great. If I'm writing a proper mystery with no paranormal elements, I struggle. And most recently, I thought I was writing a dark romance. Romance readers are like, this is not a romance. Nothing happens. But fans of vintage horror are like, yes, this is a really good approximation of the style of M.R. James. And if you like classic Victorian horror that is very, very slow to unfold and kind of all creepy and unknown and intense, but not romantic intense, you will love this. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not a romance writer.
You mentioned M.R. James, and I know if Matsu's listening right now, he's probably freaking out because he loves M.R. James. Um,
Matsu, over the weekend, I was at a convention and I was sharing a desk with an author I didn't know well before. Turns out that her name is Anna Klein. We both love Emma James, and she did her thesis on Victorian horror, basically. So, although she hasn't got any of those elements in her writing that I know of, I was just so excited to meet somebody who knew who Emma James was. So,
that's exciting.
yeah, yeah, it was a great weekend.
Yeah, I've been doing on Tuesdays now. I'm doing Christmas horror Christmas stories or gothic Christmas stories, and M.R. James is one of the authors that I'm going to be reading. So,
Oh, that's awesome. What
yeah.
stories?
Oh my gosh, there's two in my book. Let me see which ones there are. I think it's funny I have handed. There's "Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad," and then "The Story of a Disappearance and an Appearance."
Yep. So Anna and I both agree that "Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad" is the creepiest of his stories. So yeah, that should
Oh,
be a lot of fun.
Matsu's excited, right?
Yeah, I can imagine. So
Yeah.
the kind of for this project, a bunch of authors got together and did gay retellings of classic Victorian horror.
Oh.
There were 11 of us. And when I signed up, no one had picked ghost stories, so I grabbed, Emma James's story, Lost Hearts, and I called my version Hearts Lost because I am terrible at titles. But yeah,
I'm
there
terrible at them too.
are other authors took, Frankenstein, obviously, Dracula, Jekyll and Hyde. My good friend Jamie Sands did a retelling of The
Oh.
Phantom of the Opera, which
Oh.
was a blast.
That sounds good.
Yes.
Yes, I'm looking over
Yeah,
at your page and I see it's part of the Monsters and Mayhem series.
that's right.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. Oh my
So,
gosh. Um,
yep.
wow. So tell us what made you decide to write? Like what got you into writing?
I was one of those kids who just English was my favorite subject and I was always writing. But when I was 9, my family moved to Singapore. And if you haven't guessed already from my accent, I'm from New Zealand. In Singapore, not a lot of New Zealanders.
Oh.
So at first, my sister and I attended an American international school. And then 6 months later, we moved to a British international school. So at these schools, all of our teachers, most of our peers were American or British. Um, and we were learning American and British history and news and stuff all through that lens. And I'd somehow got into my head that, New Zealanders weren't important enough to have stories and, you know, matter in the world. But one lunchtime, I wandered into the library at the British school, and I picked up a book called The Changeover by Margaret Mahy. And the protagonist of this book is a girl, Laura, with wild, woolly brown hair. My hair is not quite so wild, but at the time it was wild and woolly was a good description. And Laura, it turned out, was from New Zealand. And as I was reading this book, I was just like getting all of these moments of recognition. And I was like, holy crap, and it was just this moment of, like, validation. I
Mm,
saw myself in Laura, and I felt seen. So I always knew that I wanted to write books that gave people that feeling of recognition, of being seen. And when I went to university, I stumbled into fan fiction and I was immediately drawn to like slash and fem slash. And it never occurred to me to wonder why I felt so strongly connected to all this. these queer fics basically, or yeah, why I resonated with the fandom community so much.
Mm,
And fandom is generally, I think, a very inclusive and accepting place. And so I wrote mainly slash pairings, didn't think too hard about it. Started writing my own original fiction. And then I wrote my first sort of gender fluid character. And doing that, I had the realization, oh, do you know what? I don't think I'm straight. And I'd always been a little bit afraid to write a lesbian character, but I forced myself to do that with a vampire's relic, and I wrote it, and it was like, oh, I'm a lesbian. And I came out to my family, and they were like, oh, we thought you knew. But so apparently it was really obvious to everyone but me. So now a big part of what I write, of why I write, is to give other people that feeling of recognition, but also I think we've got kind of stereotypes in our head of if you are queer in these ways,
mm,
or you're not really queer. And I want to show that there are ways of being a lesbian that are, not as obvious. And I think I'm not the only author doing this, which
mm,
is really amazing. But
yeah.
these books were not around when I was a teenager. And I think that if they had been, I could have figured out things a lot sooner.
I mean, you touched on something important. Welcome, Black Raid, to class. Representation is so important in books. And when you mention
Yeah,
the character that has the the description of your basically yourself, it is that moment of recognition that's like, oh my gosh, I see myself in this book, and that's just so important to see. And like you said, like having the fiction that you're writing, that's why I tell my students all the time, fan fiction is a valid form of writing. Because
yeah,
you're learning how to write, but you're taking someone else's character so that you don't have to do as much work at first, so that you can
yeah,
develop your voice, and then you can work on developing your characters. But also, like, with representation, there's so many stories. It's like, well, what if this person was queer, or what if this person was a different in another way, had a disability or something. I've written fan fiction before. We talked before about live journal
yeah,
role playing, and I'm being autistic myself. I've written some of my favorite characters. Like, well, what if they're autistic, or they have these traits that to me remind me of myself, that are autistic traits, and let me play around with that a little more. Zen says the Aeneid and Dante's Divine Comedy are fan fiction.
yeah, yeah. And honestly, Shakespeare took a bunch of stories that had already been told and put his own spin on
Yeah,
them. So, yeah.
I mean,
Fan fiction is also great for new authors because you get immediate feedback. And
yeah,
that is really just so helpful when you're starting out and you
yeah,
don't know if what you've got is any good or not. It's just so valuable to have yeah, that encouragement.
yeah,
So on the subject of autism, one of the things that I like about when writing the paranormal is that I'm writing about brains that are not human in any way.
yeah,
But recently, for Heart's Lost, um, I wrote my main character. I wanted to explore the way I think because I just the way my thoughts work has I've been getting into difficulties explaining things with my sister. We kind of get to a block because my mind goes very straight
right.
and can't move past the block. I need somebody to say, you could just go around it.
Yeah.
So I kind of exaggerated that trait when I was writing the main character in Heart's
Mm.
Lost, and I got a review saying that I'd done a really good job of portraying an autistic narrator,
Oh.
and I was like, oh. And I took this to my mother, and she was like, oh yeah, we're pretty sure you're on the spectrum. So it's just writing is this journey of self-discovery
It
that
really
doesn't
is.
stop.
It really is, and it's so interesting because I've written characters before too that I didn't I was putting my own traits in, and then, people are like, "Oh my gosh," I notice your character is autistic as well, and I'm like, "They are, huh? Really? Oh, I guess they are." Like it doesn't, always come through that way. Um
Mhm.
so talking too about your books. So the Secretary and the Ghost is the
Yeah,
first in the Read by Candlelight series.
yeah.
What motivated you to write this? Like, where did you come up with the idea of Pip and Cross?
So this is actually really interesting because this has never happened to me before or since. I was house sitting in
Mm.
a really remote part of the New Zealand countryside.
Oh,
I had not had human contact for 3 days. It was just me and this absolutely gorgeous sheepdog. And before leaving for this house sit, I had read a book of Gothic stories, basically. And then day 3 of this house sit, I woke up from this incredibly vivid dream that was basically the story of the secretary and the ghost.
oh wow.
And I was like, "Holy crap." And so I sat up, wrote down I think I wrote about 10,000 words that first day, which is very rare for me. And then, the next day, I sat down and was like, "Okay, I need a plot. I need to figure out where this story goes." So I looked at what I'd already written, what I could remember from the dream, and plotted it out. And then the next day, I wrote nothing because I just looked at this plot and felt stifled.
Mm,
And so on the next day, I threw out the plot and I just wrote. And so, yeah, it was a pure id story. There was just direct from the subconscious, which, yeah,
wow. That's really interesting that it stemmed from a dream.
yeah, it's a 30,000 word story, and I wrote it in a week. It was, yeah. But the interesting thing is that all of the other books in this series were like germs of ideas that I'd been sitting on for years and years and years, waiting until the right time came along. And it was like The Secretary and the Ghost, which wasn't planned, came out of a dream. It was like it just unlocked all of those stories.
Oh, I was curious as to how the other stories came about. Like, I was wondering, did you intentionally write them? Because for anyone who obviously hasn't read the series, Pip and Cross, even if they're not the focus of the story, they come around. Was that intentional on your part? Did you always want to include them in each of the books?
It just happened. And I'm so glad it did because I love it. But the Read by Candlelight series is just purely organic. Um, like a character will appear in one book and do or say something, and I'm like, oh, you have a story. I'm going to come back to you. And then Pip's family just kind of oh, they're like, the relatives who show up for the holidays and then don't leave.
Yes.
Um, they've just kind of parked themselves there and are like, "Hello, we're part of this world. Pay attention to
Yeah.
us." But other characters just show up and were not planned. Like in the worst behaved werewolf, um, we have a character who shows up. She is the sister of one of the main characters, and she was not intended to show up in that book at all. But I suddenly realized that, hey, Scott wants to free her. She should be have an active part in her escape because
Right.
something that I feel very strongly about is female characters having agency.
Yes. We love to see that.
So she showed up, did not do what I expected her to do, was extremely vocal about having agency, so much so that she then demanded her own book and her own love interest. and she has the book with the love interest now, but she's still hanging around saying, "Excuse you, my turn."
I love it.
Um, yeah, it's honestly, I feel a bit self-indulgent. I feel like as a proper author, I should have a plan and be writing with a strategy in mind, delivering readers a consistent product so they know what to expect from me. And every time I sit down, I'm like, right, I'm going to do this now. Oh my gosh, that is such a cool idea. I'm going to go do that. And it just keeps happening.
But I think that's for me, I think that's why I love the series so much because I kind of know what to expect in regards of like it's going to be paranormal. There's probably going to be romantic elements to it. But the rest I'm like, "Ooh, is it going to be ghosts? Is it going to be werewolves, vampires? I don't know." Now I reached out to you initially because when I went on Amazon to see if there was anything new, I freaked out because I clicked on the Read by Candlelight series and I saw it went from like 17 down to 5 books and I went, "Oh my god, where's the rest of the books? What happened?" So can you tell everyone like what that was, like the initial idea and then the break off?
Yeah. So I'm going to do this with props. Give me a
Okay.
moment.
We love props.
I think I've just figured out why my arms hurt so much from having done Armageddon. These books are heavy. So we start off with The Secretary and the Ghost, which has gay protagonist and strong romantic elements.
Mhm.
So it was very popular. Then, oh gosh, where is he? I do not have a copy of The Mystery of Brackenwell Hall with
Oh,
me,
I
but
loved
that
that one.
was very similar. Yep, strong gay romance elements. And then we took oh, this is terrible. I got say I'm going to get my props, and then I think I grabbed the mystery and the well-dressed werewolf so that I would have extra copies for Armageddon. We've got the well-dressed werewolf, which goes so we've got gay romance, murder mystery with
Yeah.
werewolves. And if you look at my sales for the secretary and the ghost, they're like high, high. They get to the well-dressed werewolf, and then they're like, boom. And I think that's because a lot of readers like to know what they're getting into and
Mm.
they want the same thing but different. And unfortunately, I am not a same thing but different author. I am a different author. So I think but and then going for murder mystery with werewolves, we dive straight into sexy ghosts, which yeah, so for the people who are like, "Oh yes, I love a good murder mystery." Oh, how do I feel about sexy ghosts? And then sexy ghosts were followed by classic vampire story, but with lesbians. So everyone who'd been here for the gay romance was just a little bit like, hmm. And as a reader, I like to read everything. So it was
Yeah.
I can understand people's need to kind of know what to expect. Especially I think in the pandemic, I think there's just been so much
Oh
uncertainty in the
yeah.
world that people like to be really certain about their fun escapism. So I can it's not my jam personally, but I can understand that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to reorganize this series to make it really easy for people. So I took the 5 books that all had strong gay romance elements, and I said, okay, you guys are going to be the Read by Candlelight series. And I looked at the remaining books and was like, okay, what do these ones have in common? And so the disturbance at Foxwood
Mhm.
Court starts with Pip adopting a stray dog and ends up realizing he's actually adopted his werewolf son. So I thought, okay, this is going to be the starting point of how to raise your werewolf. So I put all of the books that have like significant impact on Julian's growth
Mm.
together in that series. So and then I have my two lesbian novels and The Weeping Statue, which is like really strong horror, kind of as outliers, and I haven't figured out how to group those yet. But yeah, I'm just kind of trying to make it easier for people to find what they want, which is very difficult when your books are determined to be as different as different from each other as possible.
I think that's what's interesting about them for me though, is because even though they're so different, the characters kind of like merge and cross over into the different stories. Like the Haunted Bedchamber, that's the one. It also has the Weeping Statue characters. Was that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
And I liked seeing them. I loved the romantic elements, but I also loved that horror element too in that second book. Because I mean, yes, I love my romance, but sometimes it's like, okay, can we get on from all of those scenes and do something different? So I think that's why I liked it too. Now going forward, if you continue those books with those characters, are you gonna like kind of keep in mind as if they were one series, or and then just put them in the right category, or are you gonna focus? Are do you like? Is there? Are you gonna just continue on with Read by Candlelight, or continue on with How to Raise Your Werewolf, or are those done?
The problem is that I've got at least 6 books for in the Read by Candlelight world that are already kind of quite strong in my head. And so at this point, I can't shape them to fit a different, like, shape them to fit like into a certain character. I just have to write them and figure it out. So, for example, I have a Wild Hunt story that
Oh,
has Harriet, who is the doctor who shows up in the Secretary and the Ghost and a
right.
few later books. That's kind of her story.
Ah,
And so that does not fit into either Raising a Werewolf
right.
or reading by the reduced reading by candlelight. It's just it's going to be another outlier. And I am I'm happy with that. The other thing we should mention about this series is that it's not in I haven't written them
Yeah.
in chronological order. So if you like things to happen in a nice linear way, I've had to go back and figure out when each book happened, but I'm not writing them in chronological order, and I'm not going to start doing that either.
Okay. I like
So it would
that.
make life easier, but I'm going with whichever story is speaking to me loudest at the time I sit down to write. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that too because I think it makes it so that you're not constrained to writing one thing and you've got everything else sitting on the back burner. You can just write as you go. And again, I think that's another reason why I loved it so much, because it was like for me a puzzle. Okay, where does this fit within the timeline of Pip and Cross if you're looking at them as like the main characters of the series? Like,
Yeah.
okay, like I when we there was the right, I'm pulling up the title. The Drowning.
The
Um,
art of writing.
yes, The Art of Drowning, and I'm like, okay, that's definitely Julian. But then later on, you get how the Worst Behaved Werewolf and Disturbance at Foxwood Court, and I'm like, oh, this is the beginning of Julian. Okay, I see how he's tied into this.
Yeah. So the disturbance at Foxwood Court is kind of Julian's origin story. And this is interesting. I never intended to write that story, but I got a comment in a review. So in The Well-Dressed Werewolf, Julian in a paragraph pretty much sums up his history. And then I got a reader review saying, I feel cheated. I wanted to see that happen. And I'm like, well, there's no point writing that because I've told you what happened.
Right.
So there's no surprises there, but that idea kind of lodged itself into the back of my brain. And 2 years later, I was sitting down to write The Lady of the Bog. And then my brain was like, but you could do it in letter format. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, sorry, Florence. And just dived into the disturbance at Foxhill Court. Like, yeah, it was just, I think some ideas you just have to wait and their time will come.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, love
There
it.
was something else that an idea that sparked while we were talking just now, and the art of drowning characters.
Matsu says this advice is so
Hopefully,
helpful.
I am glad, but yeah, I am here for writing advice and questions, so we don't have
Yes.
to stick to my books. We can branch out to writing generally.
Yeah, actually, I did
Um,
have some questions that people had asked earlier. So Hero Girl Games says so she's are you in you're independently published. Is that correct? Okay.
that's kind of true. So the my plan at first was to be traditionally published. And I was incredibly lucky. I participated in the Don't Read in the Closet event on Goodreads, which is when readers submitted ideas, authors could put their hands up, grab them,
Mm,
and then we would write the reader's story for and make it available for free. But because we're putting in our time, we also had volunteer beta readers and editors working with us.
right.
So I was like, this is a really great way to like test drive the publishing process.
Ah.
So I jumped in, I volunteered, and I was paired with an editor called Raven. Raven then went on to um become an editor for the newly formed Nine Star Press, which
Oh,
is a publishing house in the States that specializes in LGBTQ plus fiction. They are fantastic because
yeah.
they really are representative and they take everything from like genre fiction to literature. They are just, and they're brilliant to work with.
Oh, I love their
But
science fiction books. They have picked some phenomenal books.
yeah. Anyway, I'm just grabbing another stack of books. Um, Raven was like, "Hey, so I'm an editor for Nine Star now. You were working on a vampire novel, right? Do you want to send it over?" And I was like, "Yeah." And that became Thorns and Fangs, which is my paranormal suspense novel. And this is hilarious. This is the cover I dislike the most of mine, but it is the cover that sells the best. Like readers apparently love Manchester.
Yeah,
I don't
it's a
know why.
torso. It's the torso that sells.
Yeah. But I was really lucky. Like, with the later books in the series, I was allowed more input into
Ah,
the cover, so you can see the difference.
yeah.
But so yeah, basically I submitted Thorns and Fangs to Nine Star. It turned into a 4 book series.
Mm,
And I got the experience of working with a cover designer going through the editing process. So I had my editor, but I also had a copy editor, a proofreader, and we like Nine Stars sent out ARCs on my behalf, advanced review copies, but I also had some to give away myself, and it was the best introduction to the publishing world. And then I had sorry, yeah.
oh, we got raided. ID, thank you for coming in with the raid. Dragon TT, Diggity Dave, Raven, thank you for helping out with the moderating. Let's see. Raven, thank you. Lorelai, welcome in. Everyone, hello, hello. We are talking to the wonderful author Gillian Kevern, and she's telling us about her books.
Yeah,
Zen
I
says that covers Zen says that cover is legitimately hilarious, and I can get why it's a bestseller.
yeah, So the story I wrote for the Don't Read in the Closet series was Deep
Uh-huh.
Magic.
Mm,
And eventually I wrote a sequel to it and then two more sequels. Now, because the Deep Magic had been written for free and edited for free as part of the project, I didn't feel like I could take it to a traditional publisher,
mm,
especially since the idea that sparked it came from Arkham, who's a German guy. And yeah, so I was like, okay, well, I will self-publish these. And through self-publishing the Deep Magic series, I discovered that I really enjoy the control
mm.
that self-publishing gives me over the editing process. So as a New Zealander, I write in New Zealand English. And Nine Star, being a American-based publishing house, they asked me to use US English, which was
Ugh.
interesting. But Deep Magic, I think I actually wound up using UK English for these books because they are set in Wales
Mhm.
mostly. But I really like to have the option to use New Zealand English. And I actually got a review for The Wing Commander's Curse where someone told me off for using the word bench to refer to like a kitchen counter. And they were like, only colonials use
Ah!
bench as in kitchen counter. Like, get your act together. And I'm like, I am a colonial.
You're
I will
right, I
say
am.
bench in agreement.
Um, that leads, so was it easy or difficult for you to do the self-publishing route? That was another question, that Hero Girl Games had.
So, having got that experience with Nine Star, I think I had a pretty easy transition to self-publishing because I knew what to expect. But there are a lot of resources available out there now
Mm.
to help people who want to self-publish. Joanna Penn of the Creative Penn podcast in particular has a lot of resources about self-publishing, how to do it, kind of the pitfalls to avoid. They're available on her website. Sarah Cannon has a course, Publish and Thrive, that takes you in video format how to upload your books
Oh,
to every single distributor. I think it's pretty easy to figure out yourself, but if you feel like you need that extra guidance, Sarah Cannon is the Publish and Thrive course is you have to buy it, but she does have sales on.
okay.
And again, she has a lot of resources available on her YouTube channel. So yeah, there is a lot out there. And if you want links or specifics, feel free to email me
Yeah,
after this chat and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction or find me on Facebook. I'm very friendly.
yeah. Oh, definitely. Actually, now that ID is here, he had a question too. He said, what for you is the hardest part of writing, and what advice would you give someone struggling with the same thing?
So my biggest hurdle, I think, was editing. So I am a sensitive snowflake. My feelings get hurt very easily. I take criticism extremely personally, and this is not confined to writing. This is a life thing. And I knew that when I became an author, I would have to deal with negative reviews and editors who might tell me harsh truths about my work. So, in a way, fan fiction was a really good kind of place to get used to receiving feedback and toughen up a bit. But I also listened to a couple of podcasts about bad books. Um, I think I Don't Even Own a Television is the one that immediately comes to mind. They kind of take badly written, traditionally published books
Mhm.
and in a very friendly way poke fun at them. And these kind of things helped me to realize, oh, criticism is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
And so, when I went through the editing process with Raven as part of Don't Read in the Closet and then with Nine Star, I was incredibly lucky. Raven and I vibed immediately. She got what I was trying to do with my story. And the editor I worked with following Raven, the exact same thing. We just vibed really well. So I never had the experience of having an editor who didn't get me and gave me really inappropriate advice. Oh, although pre-publishing, I wrote a vampire romance called The Vampire and the Accountant. It has never been published. It is the first original novella novel that I ever wrote, and I gave it to a friend who agreed to beta read with me, and she tore it apart. She was like, "This is wrong. This is wrong. I don't understand why this character is doing this. This character's really mean. What's all this about?" And eventually she was like, "It's just not Christian enough." And I was like, "What? This book is The Vampire and the Accountant. It is a gay romance. How? Where did you get the idea that it was supposed to be a Christian book?" Like, and I think having that experience was really good in teaching me that you don't have, not all feedback is going to be useful. So I practiced editing. I let myself get exposed to bad reviews of other people's work and of my work, and I kind of built up my toughness a bit. And then I published, I got terrible reviews, and I had a couple of days where I would just kind of was let myself sit with
Mm.
those feelings. And at the end of those couple of days, I had the idea for a new story and was itching to write it.
Ah,
And I went back to the reviews and they were not as bad as I thought. And I've discovered something. When I receive edits back from an editor and I first look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awful. They think I'm terrible. They hate it. I am a complete failure. I go back the next day and I'm like, oh, that's a really good
yeah,
point. Oh, hey, that was not as harsh as I thought it was.
yeah,
In fact, it's actually a compliment. It's just your mind is, don't trust your mind or your initial impression of feedbacks,
yeah,
because your mind is like, this is a scary thing. We are going to defend ourselves from it. Run away.
yeah,
And that's not actually the case. So, yeah,
yes,
just and even the negative reviews can teach you something.
yeah,
So, for example, Hearts Lost, of all of the Monsters and Mayhem books, and there's 11 in the series, it has the lowest rating on Goodreads. And a lot of people are like, this is not a dark romance, nothing happens. But I got that one review that was like, oh my gosh, this is the best book in the series because it's the only one that actually works for me as horror.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
like, oh, you know what? Given the feedback I'm getting, I think maybe I'm not a romance writer. And that was actually a really freeing realization to have.
yeah. We've got a lot of comments. A lot of people were laughing at the Christian comment. Um, Amatsu agrees that editing is painful. ID says absolutely. And also, criticism is difficult to hear sometimes, but it helps you find out what might work better in your work. Matsu kind of laughs at the vampire and the accountant title, which I want to read now.
Oh,
Raya lives in Belgium and they cannot find your books. Well, what would you say for people? Hello, Clarissa. What would you say for people who live in other countries but can't find your books?
okay. So, all of my books are available for print through my website. And I know that print is not always a great option, because postage
Right.
can suck. But I print on demand through Lulu, and Lulu has like print centers throughout the world. and I've recently switched to Lulu's. Lulu will estimate the shipping costs for me, so
Oh,
hopefully that make them more affordable. As for ebooks, Deep Magic series is available to purchase on my website. Thorns and Fangs and my other 9 Star books are available through 9 Star's website, and they are available internationally. The Read by Candlelight series, unfortunately, they're in KU, which means that you can only buy the ebooks from Amazon. So if Amazon is not an option for you in your country, there are two options. You can email me and we can set up something sneaky, or you can join my Patreon, because whenever I put out that, I should not be saying this. Whenever I put out a new release, I put it up on Patreon and my website for a week before the book goes out on Amazon, which means you
right,
can buy it in ebook format through my website, or you can get it through the Patreon subscription, which means you get charged every time I publish something new.
right.
But I have not taken down previous books from the Patreon. So if you subscribe to my Patreon, you can go back and get the previous ebooks that I've got up there. Like I am the worst business owner, but yeah, that is an option. I trust you guys not to abuse that, but yeah.
Raya is very happy. And I've included the links just now in chat to your website and to the 9 Star your author page on 9 Stars.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Raya is very thrilled.
Brilliant. And I have to just give a plug for 9 Star again for not only publishing romance. So
Yeah,
I think there is a growing desire for queer readers to see themselves beyond the romance genre, and 9 Star is definitely
yes,
working on filling that void. They've also put out a couple of anthologies featuring own voices authors, and um, I've seen them recently specifically looking for writers of color or neurodivergent or writers with disabilities. So
oh,
they really, really want to be as representative as possible in what they offer.
yeah,
So if you've got like a manuscript that's near completion, or you've finished it and you're fairly confident with it, I highly recommend submitting to 9 Star, even if you're planning to self-publish down the line. I learnt so much from working with them, and yeah,
yeah.
um,
They're I like I said, I love their books. I remember kind of when they first came about and they had a lot less, and I was like buying everything they put out because I loved their sci-fi. They had such great like space operas and just involving, science fiction, just, even if it wasn't a space opera itself, just involving space, and I absolutely loved everything they put out. There's a
so
couple that, yeah, I was like, I need to own this in print. Like that's when you know something's good. When you have the ebook copy and the print copy, like with your books, I have the ebooks and all the print books here because I'm like, oh, these deserve they deserve a space on my shelf.
yeah. So fun little 9 Star story. When they first came out, I was one of their first authors,
Mm.
obviously with Thorns and Fangs, which has quite a bit of sex in it. And I'd submitted Thorns and Fangs. I was poking around their website and I discovered they had a call out for seasonal stories. And Thorns and Fangs was 120,000 words,
Ooh,
and editing it was just like this mammoth task. But I noticed that the submissions, they said, okay, you can write erotica, and the the word count is about 5,000 words, and romance 15,000 words or above. And I was like, oh my gosh, 5,000 words. That's incredible. So I decided, I was like, it can't be that hard to write erotica. Turns out that when I write sex, I get kind of embarrassed. When I get embarrassed, my default mode is like to crack jokes. So I wrote The Ugliest Sweater, which is humorous. seasonal erotica, right? It does not work because when you're writing sexy stuff, you're raising the tension. When you tell a joke, you kill the tension. So, yeah, it is a mess, but I love it because it's my mess. But
Mm.
anyway, so I'd submitted Thorns and Fangs and The Ugliest Sweater to Nine Star. And when they launched, they were like, and coming up soon, we have releases from erotica author Gillian St. Kevern. And if you've read any of my stuff, you know that erotic is not the way to describe it at all.
There's some fun, sexy times, but
It is not the main event.
no, it's not. I would definitely say the relationship building and the characterization is fantastic. Like I love revisiting Pip in the first book and his father, the yep.
This is what I was going to say earlier. One of the best things about writing the Read by Candlelight series is seeing Pip from other characters' perspectives.
Yes.
Because Pip is somebody who is very confident and he doesn't hide who he is or filter his personality. So he is a fun character to write. But seeing him through the eyes of his son, going from like adoring as a child to kind of like, oh my gosh, you were kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
Stay out of my personal life, Dad.
Yeah. Do we really
That
need a,
is
a
that is
sarcophagus in the house? Like,
yeah. And then meeting him through the eyes of strangers who are just like, wow, you are weirdly obsessed with the paranormal.
yeah.
It is it is endless fun to me. So one of the things that interests me most and that comes up in my writing a lot is how we all have our own versions of like the truth, and we can be utterly convinced that our story is
Mm,
the right story, and it is, but that doesn't mean there aren't alternate truths out there
yeah.
and different stories that are equally valid, which is why so many of my stories either deal with truth as a theme or feature an unreliable narrator. I cannot get enough of unreliable
Mm.
narrators.
I love that. The one that probably my favorite unreliable narrator of all time is from Agatha Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That was the
Yes,
first book I read on stream because it's in the public domain, and that novel is just incredible.
yeah. Um, I did a university paper that featured the murder of Roger Ackroyd, and I was an Agatha Christie fan. I'd read it beforehand. I was so looking forward to my classmates' reactions. It was
Oh,
it was everything I'd hoped for. My experience with unreliable narrators came from studying Wuthering Heights in high
mm,
school and in university again. It was just like this novel like haunted me for years. And it turns out that I hate reading it, but I love writing it. I can writing about it. I
yeah.
can write papers about Wuthering Heights for days.
We
Just don't make me read it.
we recently finished that on stream. We read Wuthering Heights,
Yeah.
and then in my Discord we watched the 1939 version with Merle Oberon and Matsu. Where are you? My, um, Laurence Olivier in it.
Oh, brilliant.
Yes, 1930. Yes, it was so different from the book. We were like, where are the children? The children were non-existent. Let's see. Annie Vet says unreliable narration is one of my favorite tropes when done well, especially in horror. Ever since The Telltale Heart, I've enjoyed seeing variations of it. And Matsu said Heathcliff literally did nothing, which in the film version, it's it's very easy to sympathize with Heathcliff because they're saying he's this horrible person, but they've erased all of the plot points that make him horrible, which is really
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah. Chat, do you have any questions? Oh, Raven, thank you for pinning the website up at the top. So Raven is one of my moderators and she pinned your website to the chat so anyone coming in can
Oh
see
my gosh, another raven. Thank you.
it. I love Raven. She's a sweetheart. Oh, you kind of want to, you answered the question before. I was going to ask, are you a pantser or a plotter?
Well, this is interesting. So my process changes for every book. Oh, my screen time was down 67% last week. That's fascinating. Thank you. Um, but yeah, so Thorns and Fangs, I knew how it started. I knew how, the middle point, and I had no idea what happened after that. So I wrote up to the middle, and then I had to rewrite the ending 3 times
Ah,
until I found the right one. The Secretary and the Ghost completely dreamt pants, but most of my books are plotted in some respect, some more than others. Um, the Vampire's Relic, this is really interesting. I plotted it, but I didn't fully have a grip on what Hester wanted as a character.
hmm,
So I thought, I'm just going to write it and see what happens. And as I was writing the final chapter, Hester was like, and this is what I've been going for. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I then had to go back and just edit,
right.
just kind of tweak things to so that everything lined up with the internal journey that Hester had been having, completely unknown to me the entire story. So in that one, I had to write it to actually figure out what the story I was telling was. Um, Unfortunately, my process at the moment is plotting a story, writing, finishing 3/4 of the first draft, throwing the entire thing out and writing it again, but this time knowing what I'm doing. It is so frustrating, but this is what has happened consistently for the last 3 books I've written. So
Oh,
yeah.
when
So
now,
basically it's a mix.
when you say you throw it out, do you save the file just in case, or do you completely delete it and continue writing?
I save it just in case. I create a new Scrivener file for the book. And so I've got my computer is littered with like heart lost 1, heart lost 2, heart lost, and I mean it this time.
Heart loss final. Heart loss really final.
Yeah, yeah, that is my process.
Everyone, Scrivener. I use that. It's a fantastic program. Do you want to
Mm,
tell everyone like about how you use it and
yeah. So I don't know how many of you have tried to write a 120,000 word book in Word, but once you get over a certain amount of words, Word starts lagging
hmm,
and spell check no longer works. It takes ages to scroll through your work and find something. Scrivener was kind of designed to solve those problems. So you can write in little scenes and organize them into chapters, which means that you're only loading whatever bit you're working on at one time. So it's fast and it makes it easier for you to find things later in the editing process. It's got a whole bunch of useful tools like name generators, and you can tweak it so that it suggests Victorian sounding names. But I mainly just use it because it's easier and doesn't lag
yeah,
as opposed to Word or even Google Docs.
yeah.
So,
They do have
and the,
they do have a free trial, I believe, too. It's like a 30-day trial. It's well worth it. So if you're a writer, I highly recommend it as well. I use that myself. Crusader is asking that we hydrate ourselves.
yeah,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
Crusader.
Yeah, so I'm topping up my tea.
Oh, I love that
Um,
teapot. That's pretty.
this is my birthday gift to myself from 2 years ago.
Oh,
So yeah, it is absolutely gorgeous.
I love teapots. Um,
Yeah.
Matsu says
So
odd Lorelai also loves the teapot. Matsu says, how long on average does it take you to plot or write a book? And he added, I'm on 3 years editing my second book.
yeah, so
Hi, Ryan.
Thorns and Fangs took me 2 years. It was my first book. Actually, no. So The Vampire and the Accountant was my first book. It took, I don't know how long it took anymore, but it's still languishing in the ether. Thorns and Fangs after that took 2 years. Deep Magic took 2 months. Um, The Secretary and the Ghost took a week, and this is just to write the first draft. The editing process, um, I haven't really figured out a good way to track editing yet, but in 2019 and 2020, I hit a really amazing patch of like
Mm.
creativity where it took a month to write a read by candlelight book. The next month, I would write the next book. And this meant that when I went back to edit the first book, I had distance from it. So if you are stuck in editing, I think one of the best things you can go do is like go out and write a new project, even if it's just a short story. It just refreshes your brain in a new way so that when you go back to the first story, you see it differently. You've got more distance and you can edit, and it's just easier to edit once you've got that objectivity.
Oh.
You'll never be fully objective, but that's why we have editors and beta readers. Um, so yeah, I would write, it'd take 1 month to write the second book, do like my edit in a week or 2 weeks, and then send it to, I'm super lucky. I actually have a friend who's an editor and a writer. So we copy edit for each other. And at this stage, I've written a lot of books and I've spent a lot of time studying plotting. So I feel like I can do the developmental editing myself. Obviously, if I have misplaced, if I've mucked up the story structure on a major level, my copy editor will let me know. But I've kind of managed to eliminate the
Mm.
developmental editing stage from my process. And so, yeah, edit 2 weeks by myself. My friend has it for 2 weeks. It comes back to me. We proofread it and format and send it out to ARC readers. That takes maybe a week, 2 weeks. It should be 2 weeks or even a month, but I'm generally behind schedule, so I can do it in a week if necessary, and then upload to pre-order and publish.
Ah, that's really good advice
So
about
really good.
distancing yourself from it. That's really good.
Yeah.
Now,
Um,
I love the art style that you have for all the Read by Candlelight books. Was that your decision, or does the people you send it to, did they kind of follow along uh that same theme just in general, because they all fit so well.
so you will not believe this. This is a Fiverr cover. So I found an amazing
Wow.
designer on Fiverr, and her name is Creative German. She's based in Austria. Her name is Les. And basically, the way this works is that you go to book deposit, not book deposit, deposit photos. You find the photos that suit your book.
Mhm.
You can choose up to 3 of them. You give Les a link to the photos and you describe your book, you tell them the vibe you're going for, the genre. If you've got like comparative covers that you want to get the same feel for, you include links to those. If you've got branding cover colors or any design elements that you really need, you include those. And Les is just a mastermind. So, I think just Les gets me incredibly well, and
Yeah.
because we've been working together for years now, like, they know what I'm looking for in a cover, and, yeah, they are all
They
gorgeous.
are, and they work so well. You can tell they're part of a series even if they were separate. It's like these are obviously part of something like overarching, because they give such a awesome gothic vibe to them.
Yeah. So This is honestly the best kept secret on Fiverr or in the book cover world. I've been telling all my author friends about them, but they still have availability. So, and they're not incredibly expensive. So, if you are going the self-publishing route and
Okay.
you're not really wanting to invest hundreds in book design yet, check out Creative German on Fiverr. They are just so good and so easy to work with.
I'm gonna look that up. Zen says, speaking of writing tools, a bunch of my friends recommend World Anvil. Uh, if you're writing a lore character heavy story, it has a bunch of tools that help keep track of lore, timelines, chronological events, individual character traits. Raven says that she uses World Anvil for her D&D campaigns. It works super well. Um, Ideas heard that Obsidian is a solid tool as well. Anivet says, question: are there any demographics of representation you haven't tried yet that you would be open to or excited to write about?
Oh, so having accidentally written a neurodiverse MC, I would like to do more in that field on purpose. Um, I am, I want to write more lesbian stories because I feel like there's not enough gothic lesbians in the world. But over the weekend, I was actually at a convention here in Christchurch, and a bunch of people kind of were just like casually browsing my table, and then they went, "Oh my God, Ace!" and then grabbed the collector. Or, "Do you have any trans characters? You do? Oh my God!" And it was obviously those are two areas where people are hungry for
Mm,
representation. And I only have the one trans. Oh no, actually, so I have two trans main characters, one in the Christmas
mm,
party and one in the Wing Commander's Curse. In the Wing Commander's Curse, they are a supporting character, but in the Christmas party, they are my narrator, which is really cool. But so yeah, I want to write more ace characters and more trans characters. In particular, I'd really like to write a trans woman. But what makes me a little bit sort of hesitant is that because primarily with the Read by Candlelight series, I'm writing in a historical setting. So you've got the fine line between like propagating historic views which are harmful and hurtful and completely inappropriate and that I do not want to touch. But you also can't use like modern terminology. So in the Christmas party, Mika does not think of himself as a trans man. He just thinks of himself as a man. Well, and if you're a trans man, you think of yourself as a man. So it's like,
right.
okay, maybe I am overcomplicating it. But yeah, so I want to so one of the big things that I want my writing world to be is a really empowering place. So in my stories, the problem is never that someone is gay. The problem, they just happen to be gay and also they've got
Mm.
a werewolf problem. Like your sexuality and your identity is never the problem, if that makes sense. I
Right.
get really sick of seeing books that are basically somebody suffering because of their sexuality, and it kind of seems like that is the gay
Yeah.
story that the mainstream, like traditional publishing and mainstream media wants to tell. I think we're finally moving beyond that, and that is exciting, but do not want to kind of repeat that tale. I
Right.
think that's been done, and it's also not my story to tell. So I want to be like, yeah, okay, we're gay. That's not the story though. That's just part of the character.
Yeah. Ryan
I hope
says,
that makes
you know,
sense.
it totally makes sense. Yeah, because it's like, okay, yeah, I'm gay, but hello, have you seen we've got a ghost in the house and it kind of looks like somebody I know. This is problematic. Ryan
Yes.
says, it's wonderful to hear people are making their reading inclusive, and she loves hearing that. So many authors don't say that with regards to like, okay, the tragedy and the problem is not being gay, it's something else outside of that. It's like if you're reading a space opera, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm gay, but my ship is crash landing on a planet right now. That is problematic. Like, this is the issue we have.
Yep. So, oh gosh. I one of the reviews I got very early on, well, I got an amazing review of Deep Magic from a 15-year-old in the Philippines, and I was
Oh,
like, this is awesome. I am giving somebody the experience that I needed as a teenager. So I kind of stalkily friended him on Goodreads, and a few days later he was like, I really want Harry Potter but gay, where the main character gets to do exciting stuff and be the hero, but the focus of the story is on that and not on his sexuality. And I was like, you know what? I want that too. You've just articulated it better than I ever could.
yeah.
So that's kind of where I come back to when I'm sort of telling my stories. I think of Wes in the Philippines and Harry Potter but gay.
No, I love that. Got more comments. Zen says, I love that. Normalize the gay, not the drama about being gay. Ryan runs a book group and says, this is so hard to get people in the book group I run to understand. Lorelai says, the best way to make someone feel included is to acknowledge they are human first, and that what makes them special is part of them, not just all they are. And also, seeing by representation casually rather than just shoving it in my face feels so much more accepting. And Raya says, I heard Philippines. I was born in the Philippines.
Yay! So growing up, my family lived in Singapore. I also lived in Indonesia for a year. And then I spent a ton of time in Japan. And so I've met people, I've went to international schools, I've met people all over the world. And as a New Zealander, we don't see New Zealanders in fiction all that often. And I'm trying to change that. I have an half-written story with an Indonesian MC, and I cannot wait
Wow.
to finish that. Unfortunately, the two characters in that story are not cooperating with me and haven't been for several years, so I don't know when that will happen, but
Now, correct me if I'm
yes.
wrong. You also have a Maori character in one of your books, correct?
Yes. So, here we go. The Haunted Bedchamber, it's set in the UK, but Weremu, the narrator, is Maori. And actually, Hearts Lost, which is my latest new release, is set in New Zealand.
Ah.
It's in an isolated part of bush on the west coast. And it turns out that New Zealand is very gothic, and I can't believe it only occurred to me now. But yeah, my current series, that the story that I'm working on now is actually set in Christchurch. It's contemporary, and I have my my main kind of characters are both one's British, one's European, but they moved to New Zealand like in the 1850s or 60s. So I don't know if they count as New Zealanders now, probably not. But I'm excited to write about the city I live in most of the time and the people I see every day. But yeah, whether or not I can pull it off is, something totally different. But I'm really excited for the story, especially as it gives me the chance to incorporate kind of the Maori worldview
Mm.
into the story. So, yeah.
Oh, that's like. Do you think it's easier or more difficult to write like the for you personally, the contemporary or the historical?
I actually feel like there's a lot more. pressure when writing a contemporary because we all inhabit the modern world, so we all have expectations of it. And so, if an author doesn't get something right, um, we it's you can't kind of like, oh, well, it's a historical thing. You're like, oh, that's wrong. The thing is that we forget that we all experience the contemporary world in different ways. So I think people are a little bit more picky and judgmental when you're writing contemporary. Like, judgmental is a loaded word, but I don't mean that in a bad way. They're just you're kind of measuring the contemporaries against your experience of the world. And so you've got less sort of wiggle room for interpretation. The fact that I'm going to be setting this series in Christchurch and the majority of my readers are not from Christchurch, I think that will be an advantage for me.
Mm.
Um, but with the historical setting, um, you can take a lot more liberties and people are more forgiving because it's the time, or no one really knows what Victorian era Hungary is like. So if you've made an awful mistake, people are not going to notice. That said, when you're writing a historical, you kind of have to use the language in a certain way, and for a lot of readers, that's very off-putting. So there are some people who are just like, "Oh, the language is so stilted and
Mm.
stuff, I just can't get into it." And so, yeah, I think there are people who are going to vibe more with the contemporaries than the historicals, but for me personally, the historicals is my safe place. The other interesting thing is that, when you write, people tend to, well, one, you're writing from your own personal experience, and you've got kind of all your ideas and understanding of the world that you might not even realize you have. They're just part of your worldview, and you accept them because you've never questioned them. Those kind of come out in your stories. And so, along with your personal experiences and the bits of yourself that you choose to put into your characters, you're actually putting more out there than you realize. And so, readers can tend to read more into your stories than you want them to. And I think for a long time, I was reluctant to write about lesbian characters because I was like, oh, what if people think I'm a lesbian? Turns out that people already knew, and I was the one who needed to figure it out. But, I think writing historicals feels safer for me, and writing gay characters feels safer for me because very few people are going to think I'm a gay man. Very few people are gonna think that I'm a Victorian ghost enthusiast, or even, the widow of a possible vampire. So, there's kind of a lot of safety in writing historical because there's kind of a more distance between you and what you're writing it. But bits of yourself are going to come into the stories no matter what you do. So kind of you have to accept that and be open to being read, basically.
Yeah. Zen has a question about writing in general. Said, I remembered a while ago I saw an author talking about a quirk he has when writing is that when he has to write a day, his head goes instantly to Wednesday. So he'd write something like it was a cold Wednesday night content 3 days later on Wednesday. And he never noticed that till his editor told him, do you have a similar quirk you've noticed on your personal writing?
So I go through phases where there's one word or expression that I will just use constantly. Um, for one series of books, like every time a character like felt anxious or uneasy, they felt it in their stomach. They had a queasy feeling in
Oh,
their stomach was upset, it was nauseous, whatever. And this is because when I feel anxiety, I feel it in my stomach. And I sent off this story to the editor, and the my editor friend wrote to me and she's like, "Are you feeling okay?" Like, all these characters feel really sick, and I just wanted to reach out and see how you're doing.
that's too funny. I
Yeah, so Yeah.
I know when I've written,
Mm.
all my characters are always eating. They're sitting down to a meal, and I've had an editor be like, "You've got to cut all these eating scenes out. Like they can't be eating every chapter." Annie Vet said, "I'll do the same when messaging people or talking extensively. I get hooked on a word, and my sister takes delight in pointing out the word I'm overusing." I tend to notice that about people too. I have a friend who says, "Oh, that's delightful," and now I pick up on her speech pattern. I think partly because I'm autistic, like I pick up on things and reuse them, and now I'm like, that's delightful. I like enjoy that word. Oh, Raya
Yeah.
is asking us to hydrate as well.
Can I actually take a quick bathroom break? I have hydrated successfully.
Absolutely. I'll talk to my chat while you do that. All right. So, what other questions does everyone have or comments that we can share with our wonderful author here? We also have a surprise that I'll mention at the end for anyone who's been participating in the on Twitter, and you could still enter in for the raffle. If you wanted to go to Twitter and you can like, comment, and uh, retweet the most recent one in order to enter in. And I'll be taking a look and spinning a wheel to see who gets the copy. I'm curious, to see who's going to win that. And you get an entry for everything you've done, so it'll take me a day or two to get everything in together. So if you've answered, on each tweet and retweeted and quote tweeted, you get multiple entries into the giveaway, and we'll see who gets the book or books. We'll see. Um, ID, how was your stream? I didn't get to ask earlier. Hopefully it was good. Lorelai, you were streaming as well. How was that? As the inform Oh, it went well. Yay! Did he redeem himself in wooing his person Monster Prom round 2? Or did he fail again? You won again. He failed again. Oh, that's gotta say something right there. Oh, ID, what a fail. Oh my goodness. I'm 2 for 2. You know how to woo your ladies. Oh. I hope everyone's enjoying and finding the advice to be helpful. Uh, Excellent. I'll share that. Looping back to around to the rewrites of horror classics, I'd be fascinated to read those because I love the classic monsters, but appreciate interpretations. Ladies and the gents. Let's go, Lorelai. Welcome back. So Annie Vet says, looping back around to the rewrites of horror classics, I'd be fascinated to read those because I love the classic monsters, but appreciate interpretations that can make them even scarier through another lens.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting the approaches that everyone has taken. So, Beautiful Adam is a contemporary retelling of The Picture of Dorian Gray,
Ooh.
and I haven't read it yet, but it's, like, on my to-read list, and it is, kind of an influencer and a Hollywood kind of power player kind of shaping him into, like, this, big name, and, oh, I think the author described it as, like, the messy Hollywood power couple that you did not want and do not need. And yeah, it is. It sounds incredibly messy and sexy and dark.
Mhm.
But so I'm like, oh, I want to read this, but I'm gonna have to wait until I'm in a really good place and can handle it. I am
Yeah.
a massive whip. Um, Jamie's Night's Melody, which is their Phantom of the Opera retelling.
Oh.
Like, you should not be able to make the Phantom of the Opera sweet and fluffy, but it kind of is.
I
It
love it.
it's great, yeah, so it is, Eric is still stabby, lots of people die, but you're still like, "Oh, Eric,
Mm.
no."
That's not
Y
good.
yeah, I have no idea how Jamie pulled that off, and yeah, it's fascinating. There's a Bluebeard retelling in there.
Oh.
Oh, and the last book in the series is actually a retelling of, Dickens' A Christmas Carol. It's M.M. Scrooge.
Oh. Oh. I'm
And it
definitely
it
checking
is
that out.
so utterly hilarious, yes.
That's a perfect timing for the year. Zen
Yeah.
says, my sister has a quirk where she keeps getting characters' faces get illuminated by the moonlight as the moon appears from behind the clouds, and I've had to tell her multiple times why she can't use that in that situation. Why? Because this is a deep dungeon. The rescuer went down 6 flights of stairs to get to the cells. There's no way the moon is getting anywhere near that chamber.
Yeah, not unless the dungeon has been designed with a skylight, which would be equally hilarious.
It's like where dungeons usually in buildings. That would be an intriguing one. Unless it's
Mhm.
intended to hold a vampire and that skylight is a
Ooh,
threat.
yeah.
That would be an interesting take to it. Let's see. Any so I think we can, kind of begin wrapping it up. I don't want to take your entire day. Um, do you have any advice for writers in the chat?
Yeah, find other writers. So, writing is a really surprisingly tough job. Like, it is so much fun. You get to hang out with your imaginary friends all the time, but there is a lot of self-doubt and second guessing yourself. And it is just so helpful to have other people around
Mm,
you who understand. So, for example, I can say, like, I'm trying to write, but my characters will not do this very simple thing. And my sister will be like, you're in charge, just make them do it. And if you're a writer, you know that that is not possible.
yeah.
So it really helps to be around people, whether that is online or in real life, that get it and who have been there, who are at about the same level or just a little bit further ahead of you. You do not want to hang out with bestsellers because that gives you all sorts of like
Yeah.
self-doubt and inferiority
Yeah.
complexes. You want to find people who are in the same kind of stage of writing as you are, or a bit further ahead, and so you can form like critique partner
Yeah.
relationships, and you can vent when things go wrong, and you can share the new marketing tip or the new editing technique that you've just found about, or tell them about new software and get advice and help in return. And you would be surprised, I think, by how many writing groups are out there. So look around now. In Pride months, in particular, if you're looking for an inclusive group, look at listings for like writing groups or book discussion groups with like queer focus. Those can be really good ways to start looking for people to be your real life writer tribe. I had a lot of success with the Romance Writers of New Zealand. It turns out that the Christchurch chapter is an incredibly diverse and accepting group of people, and I've made um, really good friends. Now, romance writers are people who want to publish and be successful at it. So, romance writers, more than any other group of writers I've met, are focused on honing their craft and learning the business of writing. And they have so much energy. I just like, if you can find the right group, romance writers are fantastic to be around. Having said that, I know that the Romance Writers of America has a lot of issues. I believe there are some good chapters and some not great chapters.
Yeah.
So, like, test drive your local chapter. But if a group doesn't vibe with you for whatever reason, feel free to walk away. Like, you are under no obligation to people who don't get you or get your writing. Um, you will kind of get a sense for people who are giving you advice that works for you and people who are giving you advice to feel better about themselves or to eliminate you as competition.
Mm, yeah.
So, it is like, and when you find an editor, you will have to go through the same process of finding somebody who gets you. But yeah, Facebook and Discord are really good places for you to find online writing groups if there aren't many people in your area. Um, Myself and author friend Jamie Sands, who's going to be hanging out with you in
Yes.
January, and they are amazing. Do not miss that. Jamie is just so much fun. We've actually started hosting writing live streams on YouTube. Unfortunately, we're probably not going to be doing any more this year, but you can hang out with us from 10 to 12, Saturday and Sunday, New Zealand Standard Time, where this sounds utterly bizarre. We sit on YouTube and we write and we have a chat going where other people join us. Sometimes it's writers. We've got one artist friend who has been working on like sculptures and stuff while we
Oh,
stream. But it's basically productive writing sprints with chat in between. So that's a great chance to kind of hang out with writers virtually. But actually, having said that, we're not the only people hosting writing live streams on YouTube. If you search for using the hashtag AuthorTube, you'll find other writing live streams. So if our time zone doesn't work for you, there will be other authors out there doing the same thing
oh,
that will work for you. But basically, just keep searching until you find a group that vibes with you and just say hi. Just comment here and there, be supportive, and people will welcome you in. I found writers as a group to be incredibly kind and encouraging because we all know how much work it is and
yeah.
we want you to succeed.
Yeah, excellent. Zen says as a final comment, when a character is still fresh clay, that's fine, but after a while they get minds of their own. And
Yeah.
Lorelai, do you mean Jamie would love Discord groups or Gillian would love them?
We both love Discord
Yeah.
groups, but we've made a Discord group. I think it is Kiwi Writing Streams
Ah.
to go along with the YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. Excellent. We'll definitely have to
Yeah.
check that out, and I'll include the link.
Jumping back quickly to characters having minds
Oh.
of their own, I've discovered that my characters are smarter than I am and know themselves better than I do. So when I don't feel like I will plot my story, I will start writing it, but I don't feel like it is a real story until it has gone off script, until the characters have said, "Hey, forget that, we're going this way."
Yeah.
And I think that's because once the characters start making their own decisions and your story starts evolving beyond your plot, you are in new and exciting territory. And if it surprises you, it's going to surprise your readers.
Ah.
So when your characters start arguing with you or take the story in a new direction, don't panic. That is the best thing that can happen for you and your story. Go with it. You can get them back on plan later, but see where they go.
Ah, that's great advice. Yeah. Have you ever cried writing one of your stories?
Yes. Which story was it? Oh my gosh, it was The Lord and the
I was gonna say, was
Banshee.
it the Lord of the Banshee? I know I
Yep,
sobbed through that one.
yep. I have a review of that, which is basically it's like 4 stars and then it's just the crying emoji.
I'm not gonna
Yep.
say what
Don't read
happens.
The Lord and the Banshee.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't read it.
I think you said that to me. I was like, no, and you're like, just don't read it right now, because I was like, no.
Yep. So Cross is not gone. This is a world that has ghosts. I have started writing the one where Cross makes his
Oh,
presence known.
thank
Like,
God.
it's so stupid. Like Pip is like, he's got the Ouija board, he's got everything, he's all set up to like receive messages from the spirit world, but he's not in danger. And Cross is like, well, I'm not just gonna be here for you on demand. I'm not your performing ghost."
That's
And
so cross.
Julian's like, "Dad, he's here. I can feel his presence. Forget about it." And Pippa's like, "I'm so alone and unloved. No one cares for me." And Julian's like, He's here. I'm telling you."
Pip.
Oh my
I,
gosh.
Pip is such a great. He's so dramatic. I love. I just love him.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here and being my first author on stream. I'm so excited about that. It was so great to finally meet you and be able to talk and chat about the
This
books.
has been so much fun. Talking with you is great. I love the chat. You guys are all awesome, and you've asked some really good questions.
Yes.
So please feel free to email me, like if you have further questions or you just want to share, "Hey, I listened to you. Now my characters have done this completely ridiculous thing, and I blame you." I am happy to take the blame, and I'm also happy to talk you out of deleting scenes. Um, give you creative Germans like contact details, tell you how to find them on Fiverr for when you're cover ready, anything like that. So yeah.
Yes. Annie Vet says that it was a delight getting to know you. And oh, I should also mention that the surprise that I mentioned is that originally, so I had been posting on Twitter saying, enter a giveaway for a copy of The Secretary and the Ghost, a digital copy, like, retweet, comment, answer these questions. The most recent one was, what book would you recommend to someone right now? Well, there's been a bit of change in plan slash surprise. Gillian has decided that we're going to give away a copy of 3 books in the series. Which 3 do you think would be best to give away?
So I'm going to suggest The Secretary and the Ghost, Mystery of Brackenwell Hall, and The
Oh,
Well-Dressed Werewolf, because they're the first 3 in the Read by Candlelight series as I originally wrote them.
mm,
And I think they are tons of
I
fun.
love them. Mystery of
But
Brickenwell Hall was great.
if you are if you've been listening to this and you're like, "Oh, I would prefer like another book," let us know. I am not like those are my recommendations, but I'm happy to change things up. Also, actually, if you would like a sampler of my work, on my website, I have got the Gillian St. Kevern sampler, which is like an introduction to my work. It's Deep Magic, The Secretary and the Ghost, Thorns and Fangs, and The Ugliest Sweater, which is the Christmas themed erotica.
I love that.
But they're all available to download for free, and
Let's
it's
see.
basically the chance to test drive my work. All 4 of those stories have incredibly different vibes, so you might discover that you're all about the Secretary and the Ghost, but none of the others work for you, or you might click with like Deep Magic instead. And so it's just yeah, the chance to explore my work without any financial commitment. And then if you like them, they all have sequels. So
Oh, you're gonna love them. Like, you're not gonna stop reading. It's so great. Well, thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it. And chat, thank you for being here and thank you for the great questions. Normally at the end of a stream, I raid into someone, and it looks like one of my friends is still streaming, so we're gonna send everyone over to Kuro. Tomorrow, I am actually going to be. I'm not going to stream tomorrow like I normally do. So Kuro-sama and I are playing Apex Duos. I'm going to drag him down miserably and fail horribly. But if you want to check it out, I'm going to be on his stream, so we can, give him some views and get him to affiliate status. So everyone, thank you for coming in. Gillian, again, a billion times, thank you. And
my
everyone,
absolute just this was so much fun. Thank
I
you.
loved it. Yes. So everyone, Raya is excited to read. So everyone, take care. I will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.